Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Hart, and this is our lecture on Survey of State and Local Government. Lecture 3 Constitutional Differences. Let's go. So, one of the things to note about constitutional differences in the United States is just how different the constitutions are in terms of length. The Constitution of the United States, or the federal Constitution, is very short. As Kevin Smith points out in his textbook Governing States and Localities, it's only about 7,400 words in length. And this includes everything. The original Constitution of the United States, written in 1787, which was about 4,500 words, and then additional 3,000 words or so that are found in the 27 amendments that we have had to date. So, this being said, how does it compare to state constitutions? Well, state constitutions tend to be much longer. On average, they have 26,000 words. And in some states, for example, in New York and in California, constitutions are roughly 50,000 words long. So 7 times as long as the Constitution of the United States. The longest constitution is that of Alabama, and it has over 310,000 words. So that's more than 40 times the length of the United States Constitution. So, why is this disparity? Now, before we answer this question, I do want to state for those who might not know, the Constitution of the United States, while it was written in 1787, as I said, was actually approved in 1788, a year later. And it really actually went into full effect in 1789 and 1790. And the reason why is because the Constitution of the United States, it set up 3 different branches of government: legislative, executive, and judicial. And it took time to actually hold elections and then to organize these different branches of government. So the first presidential election that we ever had spilled into 2 years. It was held in 1788 and 1789. So it was only concluded in 1789. George Washington became president by the unanimous vote of the Electoral College. And in 1789, the first Congress of the United States was seated. So effectively, 1789 is the year when the government of the United States begins to operate under this Constitution. But it was not until February of 1790 that the third branch of government was organized. The Supreme Court of the United States met for the first time in February of 1790, and that's because federal judges are not elected, they are appointed, all of them, by President of the United States, and then confirmed by the United States Senate. So first you needed to have President in place, George Washington, and then you had to give him time to make the appointments, and then the Senate had to take its time to confirm those appointments. And so this is why you don't really have government of the United States fully in place until really February of 1790. So purposes of the constitutions. The reason, really the basic reason why you have such disparity in length between the federal constitution and those of the states is because they pursue different purposes. The purpose of the U.S. Constitution is to set up the basic structure and function of government. That's it. The purpose of state constitutions is to go beyond that and to include most essential legislation. Okay? So the Constitution of the United States gives you the bare bones, really the skeleton, speaking anatomically, of how the government of the United States is to be organized. But state constitutions include that for their own state governments, but then they go above and beyond that and continue on with different legislative provisions, or rather constitutional provisions that you would normally find in ordinary state legislation. And the reason why this happens is because states want to signal that some of their laws are so crucial, symbolically or practically, that they should be part of their highest law, of their constitution. So instead of simply making ordinary laws, they make laws that are part of their constitution. Okay? Now, another reason why you have this disparity in length between the constitutions is because the Constitution of the United States applies only to government, but not to private parties. There is only one, as of this recording, exception to this, and that's the 13th Amendment. The 13th Amendment prohibits slavery, and neither the government nor a private party may own slaves. But in every other provision, when the Constitution of the United States speaks, it addresses itself to government. It may be to the national government, it may be to state governments, it may be to both, but it doesn't address itself to private parties. So if somebody tells you, well, respect the Constitution of the United States and live by it, that statement is constitutionally illiterate, because you cannot, as a private individual, live by the Constitution of the United States, because it doesn't speak to how you should live at all. Now, state constitutions, they regulate both governmental and private behavior, and you will find, especially in those very long constitutions like California's or New York's or Alabama's, provisions that do govern individual behavior, and provisions that if you violate, you would be in fact acting unlawfully and could be legally punished for doing so. Now, the next and really last major piece of information that I want to address here is the different types of democracy that the Constitution of the United States and state constitutions set up. The Constitution of the United States allows for indirect democracy only. Indirect democracy is when the people vote not for laws, but for their representatives, and then representatives make laws on behalf of the people. This is why it's called an indirect democracy, because rather than making the laws directly, the people first choose their representatives in free and fair elections, hopefully. And then those representatives make laws, hopefully on behalf of the people. Direct democracy is when people can make their own laws. And so at the state level, you do find direct democracy. At the national level, you do not. The founders of the United States Constitution had a deep suspicion of ordinary people, of the common man, and did not want to give ordinary people too much power. Alexander Hamilton reportedly said, "The masses are the asses." So the founders did not want the people to be oppressed by their government, but they also didn't want the people to exercise too much power. And one way to achieve that goal was to establish indirect democracy, so that you could only vote for your representatives, but not for laws. At the state level, over 100 years ago, a change has begun to allow direct democracy in addition to indirect democracy. There are three basic elements to direct democracy that you find at state and local levels. These three elements are initiative, referendum, and recall. Now, all 50 states have at least one element of direct democracy, but not all 50 states have all three of these elements. However, the vast majority of the states do have all three of these elements at their state and local levels. So what is initiative? Literally, this is where the people write their own laws and then vote up or down on those laws. So when the law gets written, then there is a process, and it varies a little bit from state to state, where this initiative has to get a specific number, let's say, of signatures, valid citizen signatures, to get on the ballot. And once that happens, this initiative becomes known as a proposition. And at election time, the voters come out and they vote yes or no on that proposition. What happens in actuality is all the people of the state cannot really write every initiative. And for practical purposes, what happens is organized interests, also known as interest groups, hire professional lawyers to word these initiatives, because initiatives are for practical purposes laws or future laws, and they have to be precise. And so what happens is well-heeled, politically savvy, and usually wealthy groups organize, hire attorneys, have them write initiatives, and then send out people in the field to collect signatures from ordinary voters to get those initiatives up on the ballot, and then the voters come out and vote yes or no. So the initiative process, which exists in almost every state in the United States, has actually taken some power away from professional politicians, but has it put more power in the hands of ordinary people? Perhaps. What it really truly did, we can say, is that it put more power in the hands of well-organized interests, whatever those interests happen to be in any given state. And those are usually interests that either have a lot of money or have a very specific, coherent agenda and know how to network politically and push their agenda. And sometimes they have both money and political skills. The second element of direct democracy is referendum. Referendum is when the legislature, state legislature, writes the law, but then instead of voting up or down on that law, it sends the law for the up or down vote to the people. And at regular election time, people come out and they vote yes or no on the referendum. So really the only conceptual difference between initiative and referendum is that in the initiative process, the people, i.e. interest groups, write the initiative, write the proposed law, and then that goes on the ballot for a yes or no vote. While during referendum, the first stage is different. Instead of people or interest groups writing the law, it's the state legislators who write the law, and then people come out and vote up or down on that law. And finally, you have recall. Recall is an unscheduled early election meant to decide whether a given politician is supposed to be replaced from his or her office prior to his or her term expiring. So recall is quite popular at the local level, when angry parents sometimes organized unscheduled elections and yank board members, school board members they don't like, from their positions to be replaced by hopefully better ones. At the state level, you also have recall in most states, but at the state level, recall is rarely successful. There have been a few notable cases, like when Arnold Schwarzenegger became governor in 2003, in October of that year. That was during this unscheduled recall election. The scheduled election was in 2002, and then the next one was supposed to be in 2006. That was the next regularly scheduled election. However, the voters of the state of California were so angry by Governor Gray Davis, approving vehicle registration tax hike, that they organized this recall process, and Governor Davis was in fact recalled, and Arnold Schwarzenegger was elected governor in his stead. So, to summarize, the national constitution, the Constitution of the United States, sets up the basic structure of government, the basic function of government, and does not address itself, with one exception, does not address itself to private parties. Therefore, the Constitution of the United States is very general in its verbiage and very short. State constitutions go beyond setting up the structure and function of their state governments, and they tend to be long because they address themselves not just to the government, but also to private parties, and often include all manner of specific mandates that you would typically find in ordinary law. Some state constitutions say which conditions have to be met to get a fishing license or a hunting license, etc. So they tend to be very specific. And of course, in our system of state-national relations, no state law, not even state constitution, may contradict federal law. Federal law trumps state law if the two conflict. So let's say if a state constitution conflicts with the national constitution takes precedence. Thank you.